Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Find a Moment podcast, where we navigate the space between ideals and everyday life. We are your hosts, Gretchen Roberts and Jennifer Ford, and we look forward to finding a moment with you today. Hello, welcome back to the Find a Moment podcast. We are finishing our summer book club series today with our second conversation on Aundi Kolber's Try Softer. If you haven't listened to our first episode on this book or our previous fiction choice of Chapter 1 again by Keelia Clarkson, please go back and listen to those conversations. Our first book club episode on Try Softer, we talked about part 1 of the book. She was explaining kind of the process of becoming, and so we talked about the timeline of our life and kind of writing the major events, whether they be celebrations or kind of monumental things or the hard, traumatic things, to just kind of go back and reassess your life and your story. And then we talked about attachment and our window of tolerance, being a compassionate witness for ourselves and others, and boundaries. And so today we're going to dive into part 2, which is the practices to try softer. So this is where we kind of take all that we learned in the first section and apply it with some specific areas that we can try softer with. And the topics that she addresses are trying softer with your attention, with your body, with your emotions, with your internal critic, and with resilience. So she starts with trying softer with attention, and I really liked this chapter. It reminded me some of our Meet the Artist series, where we just talked so much about beauty and being in nature and being creative and kind of taking the time to notice and to pay attention to what's around us. And one of the terms, she's given us a lot of new language to use, like window of tolerance and compassionate witness. And one of them that she brings up in this chapter is beauty hunting, which I just love that idea, to go on a beauty hunt. Are there things about attention that stuck out to you, Jennifer?
Yes, and I feel like the word attention, I had to sort of like, this was kind of building out the idea or the concept of attention for me, because been such a huge part of a few like significant parts of my life. For one, with homeschooling, like building the habit of attention for our children, and also feeling like with social media and technology being so integrated into everyday life and having teenagers, I feel like I'm constantly trying to guard the attention of my children
Yeah.
because just of what happens neurologically with, heavy consumption of technology, especially the short form content. So building a child's attention span, building the habit of attention, and then guarding the attention of my children and myself, even my own personal consumption of media, that affects attention span too. And then also for myself, being ADHD, already having this wiring that makes attentiveness challenging. I'm definitely the squirrel person. I mean, I can multitask. And by multitask, I mean jump from one thing to another. Maybe not multitask. Maybe I'm just squirreling everything. So I feel like the way that she kind of was talking about attention, it was helpful to have kind of an additional layer of the way to think about that. But the attentiveness part, like how finding, for example, the beauty hunting thing, she gave some examples of that being kind of this anchoring, this tool that sort of provides this anchoring or the stability in a moment where maybe you are approaching the end of your window of tolerance.
Mhm.
And she talked about the use of that in some therapeutic settings with some of her clients. And I felt like, especially for something, I mean, I've never really heard of that concept being used in a clinical setting. I thought this is something that's simple enough, it's accessible enough. It kind of doesn't matter if you need to use that as a grounding exercise. It kind of doesn't matter where you are. Just knowing that that's a strategy, that's something that you could easily use, and returning back to that that thing of beauty, or that she had a word for it, but just having something to return your attention to when whatever the scenario was, or the event that you're discussing, or that you're kind of going through, letting that be something that you return to, that helps you kind of ground and
Mm-hmm.
be stabilized by. I thought that was a new concept for me. What
Mm.
about you?
I loved that idea of beauty hunting. And I think it goes along with everything that God made is sacred. And
Mm.
I alluded to that in the first episode that I was at camp with the kids, and that was kind of their word for camp, and that was my word for the year last year. So seeing things differently and seeing the beauty in things, of even if it's like the other night, I was sitting with one of my teens, it was late at night, and we see this big spider, walk across the floor. And just watching it and looking at it up close, and not being, oh, gross, a spider, whack it and kill, like, no, let's just look at it and take a
Mhm.
minute and guide it outside. And so it's seeing beauty just in these little things that are made, and it's the sunset every night. She talks about the sunset. And I
Mhm.
think that the beauty and the rhythms of beauty, when it's springtime and you're noticing all the flowers bloom, and then, all those rhythms, it creates those habits and those patterns that you always can come back to. So that kind of correlates with the mindfulness that she talked about too, of that, just it's this awareness of where we are in actual real time. And I think the more and more that our minds are in an alternate reality, whether it's social media or our screens or text messages, which there is reality in text, but just in the physical space of where you are, that they've shown like the eye development of children and the issues that we're seeing medically with the eye development of children, because they are not outside. They are not developing these eye muscles that have to focus far away and close up and see the depth of that tree down there versus the leaf in front of you. And God made it so that we will see this beauty, because it's good for our eyes. It's good for our vision, so there's just these really like practical ways that it helps you. But anyway, that was kind of a long-winded answer.
Oh, that's great. I've heard Andrew Huberman talk about eye development, what you're talking about in children,
Yes.
and the issues with them not having the distance, them not being exposed to things that their eyes are forced to focus on that are distant, as opposed to, only looking at a screen that's 6 inches from their face.
Yes. And I loved in mindfulness, she talked about Lectio Divina, which is kind of these spiritual practices that even kind of go back to kind of the time of the monks in the monasteries, and they would order their days to where they had prayer time. So they had these certain times that they would go and recite the Psalms or recite this passage, and they are in nature. And so I think building those rhythms in helps you to build that mindfulness and that awareness of beauty. And it kind of cultivates your attention, because you have to, like you said, you have to practice it. It's like
Mhm.
all the other things that are good for us. We have to build those muscles. And she talks a lot about the senses, whether it was in the grounding exercises or even in mindfulness, about just putting your hands under the faucet and noticing the temperature of the water, and going outside and bare feet and feeling the grass. And I think a lot of times we can think that those things are kind of for children, but I think it reignites that childhood awe and wonder. And like Jesus said, the faith that, that childlike faith that is so important.
Every evening over the last several days, I have felt this need to go just to be outside. And because I've been inside a lot with the heat, because it's summer
Mhm.
when we're recording this in coastal North Carolina. It's been like
And
almost
record
100.
high temperatures. I think we've had several days of record highs, which is crazy.
Yes, almost 100 degrees. But when it does start to, like, I don't know, maybe a little bit before dusk, I'll go outside and I'll just water my plants or trim something that probably doesn't need trimming, but I just needed a reason to go outside. But it is so calming and refreshing to just step outside and see, kind of just see what kind of surprises I can find, because that's one of the things I love about nature is that there's always, you don't know what to expect. You don't know if there's, going to be a wasp or a bee or a snake, like what was in our neighbor's yard tonight. Like, you just never know. So that's one of those things about attentiveness. Nature study, we
Mhm.
homeschooled, and the Charlotte Mason method was a big part of what influenced our how we structured and prioritize things in nature study. A big part of that is developing the habit of attention, because when you are nature journaling, you are having to observe the details about something and transfer it onto paper as you are journaling, or or you're drawing or painting or whatever.
Mhm.
Being in nature and building the habit of attention, that was a big part of what we did for so long, and I'm realizing how much I missed that. But what that does to me physically, because I know I've mentioned, and in our first part of the discussion of this book, in our last episode, I talked a lot about how I feel like I'm a little bit disconnected from my body in terms of cues, and what do I feel when I have
Mhm.
emotions, and in hard situations, do I feel things in my body? I typically don't, or either I don't feel them, or I'm not aware that they are there. But what I do feel when I go outside is definitely like my breathing rate slows down, my heart rate
Mhm.
calms. I definitely feel something different from when I'm inside. And I can remember when Lucy was a baby, she was born in April. And when she would get really fussy, or just seemed like she kind of wouldn't settle, I would take her outside on the porch, kind of getting closer into the summer, and just stepping from inside the air conditioning to being outside into the warmth of the day,
Mhm.
like late spring and summer, it would calm her down almost instantly. And I don't know if it was because it was so bright, or it was the
Mhm.
heat or just the fresh air, but that was one of the things that I remember always seemed to help when she would be fussy, is we would just step out on the porch, and it seemed kind of to be this, inside when your baby's crying and you're tired and you just
Yeah.
feel kind of trapped and stuck, and like what is this chaos? And then you step outside and you're both breathing fresh air, and then the baby calms and settles, and it's like this kind of mysterious, soothing thing.
Yes. We did a lot of family hikes, and at certain times we would say, okay, we're going to do a census hike. And so as we were hiking, we would have to, okay, everybody say something you hear, so everybody's quiet and listening, what do you hear, and what do you see and what do you feel? And then this cute, we always had this tradition. My husband would always bring a little package of Swedish fish on our hikes, and they called them red gooey fish. And
Mm,
so when it came time for what you taste on the hike, then Daddy would give everybody a red gooey fish. And so it was just kind of a little thing to keep them going and build their endurance, but and to have awareness of their senses on the hikes. And so I see now, as our oldest kids are older and out of the house, how much they still enjoy going on hikes and being in
mm.
nature and just appreciating the beauty. Those little things that you do when they're little, it stays with them. And it
Mm.
stays with us, and we end up missing it, right? We want to do it again.
Well, we should do it.
That's right. We should go on a census hike.
We should do it. Well, what's our next section? So we've talked about attention.
Yes. So then
And
the next section is trying softer with your body. I like how she kind of starts out with the reality that, a lot of us want a different body. And I think it's interesting to me, I think especially with women and maybe with men too, but it seems more prevalent with women that so many women want what someone else has, and then that someone else wants what someone, like, does anyone not want a different body?
right.
So just that awareness of like what our bodies are made for and what they are. helping us to do. And I think there are several people, like when we talked about our health and wellness series and we talked about longevity and health span. And, I do think some of the narrative is changing as far as we want to build bodies that are going to get us into old age and carry us well. And it's not about being a particular size or a particular number, that there is a greater function of our bodies. I love that that is kind of a trend or a more of an awareness, hopefully not a trend, hopefully more of an awareness. And this is the part where she does talk about the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which I think we referenced that in our first episode. And she says, we know we can try to run from the wisdom and experience of our bodies. After all, disconnection is one way we make it through uncomfortable relationships and experiences. But the truth is, our memories and experiences do not simply go away. Our bodies are their keepers, for better or worse. So yeah, having that awareness so much. I think we talked about a lot of the grounding exercises, of the senses, of that interoception where you are thinking of, what is my breathing like? What is my heart rate like? And as a pediatrician, I've walked through multiple times of kids and particularly teenagers, and a lot of my camp medical experience too, and then with teenagers having what we feel like is a panic attack, which can feel like this dissociation from your body. And so doing those grounding exercises in those moments with teens is so helpful. Of, what are you feeling? Let's feel your t-shirt, feel your hands, rub your hands together. And what do you feel? And this is something that doesn't just have to be for a teen who is feeling anxiety or panic. You can do things like this with a toddler who is dysregulated, like, let's feel this cold water, or find, what is something that's scratchy, maybe a dish sponge, like a dish sponge that's kind of scratchy, and just to feel those different textures. A lot of times kind of our dysregulation or our anxiety or whatever worry or fear that even a little one is feeling, just bringing awareness to their senses kind of helps them to regain their place in the world and their calmness. And it really is amazing as you walk through and do those steps with someone who is really struggling, to see their respiratory rate slow and their heart rate slow, and you can kind of see in their eyes that there's more of a connection. And so those exercises, I mean, they can kind of sound bizarre to people, I think, maybe, if you're first reading it, or kind of childlike, but it really is so helpful practically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember several years ago. I don't know that anything necessarily triggered it, but I was taking the girls to a campus. We were going to CHC. I was taking them for classes one morning. When we got there, I don't know what it was, if it was traffic, or I don't think it was a chaotic car ride. I mean, I don't know what it was, but I felt really overwhelmed.
Mm.
And we got out of the car, and I remember, and it was just a few years ago. And I told the girls, I was like, I don't really know what's happening. I'm feeling very overwhelmed and overstimulated. I remember walking around to the back of our car and doing I don't know if one of the girls suggested it or if I had heard about it, but I did the five senses things, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I want you to know that it absolutely helped. And it does something about bringing part of the brain back online to help. I'm not sure if it's the prefrontal cortex or what part of the brain, but it absolutely did what I needed it to do. But it was just one of those odd kind of, it would make sense if it had been in a moment where we almost got in a wreck, or, if
Right.
something, if we'd seen something sad or really awful or
Mhm.
whatever, or heard something on the radio, but we didn't. I just, for some reason, my body was just really kind of overloaded. It absolutely did help.
Mhm.
So I definitely had an experience with that. I do remember her talking about how she had a time, like even as early as 12 years old. She's talking about different seasons of her life where she's really not pleased with her body, like what you had mentioned. and she's kind of recounting these moments and going like all the way through motherhood. And she's eventually landing on the idea that she is her body. And
Mm,
I had to kind of back up and re-listen to her talk through this again because I wanted to make sure that I understood what she was saying because I have for I'll say since my mid 20s, so 25 years, I have seen my body as a vessel that
mm,
the Lord has entrusted to me, but I don't live with the belief that I am sort of captured is not going to be the right word, but I am not one with my body or
mm,
that I am contained by or restrained or retained some of those words
mhm,
have kind of a negative connotation, but she said it multiple times. I am my body. I have found a tremendous amount of freedom in not identifying myself with my
mm,
body because there were years that I struggled with unhealthy thoughts and beliefs about my physical body. And there was shame attached to that. And it was in my mid 20s when I first returned to my relationship with the Lord. After all these years for wrestling with this, I found the most freedom when I finally felt like the Lord said, "You are not your body. You are
mm,
not your face. You are not your physique. You are not your figure. You are not the size of the clothes that you wear." Not, size is, your clothing. Like that's kind of an extension of that. But I felt so much, trying to think of what the right word would be. It was so dysfunctional, the relationship that I had with my body, because I had it kind of overlapping with my identity. And
mhm.
so when I began to separate those two and started living that way, I found so much freedom.
Yes.
And because I also saw my body as flawed, I saw my
Mm,
skin as flawed, I saw my hair as difficult, like all of these physical parts of myself.
right.
And I don't know if maybe her message is that I am one with my body and I accept my body.
Hmm.
I think that is part of the message because I don't think the way that she talked about it was necessarily unhealthy, but it was
Right.
interesting that she kind of landed on this place of oneness with the body. And
Hmm.
I have found freedom in my spiritual journey with not with sort of untangling that.
Right.
And I'm sure that there's some deeper work that I could do to kind of articulate and kind of dig and see what really happened in my early 20s. Like
Mm,
what was that really doing? What was that really separating? Was it really just separating my identity and my value from my dysfunctional relationship with myself? Or was it, yeah, I would need to do a little bit more digging. But I would still say now that I don't align with the idea that I am my body because
right.
I see my body as a temporary vessel that I am given the honor and the privilege to steward and care for. But I thought that I don't know that I've ever heard anybody else articulate that.
Hmm.
What did you think when you read through that?
I agree that it was weird when it was the sentence she ends kind of that paragraph with, my body is me. And so I looked at what she's referencing, which may be another thing in the audiobook is that you're not seeing the footnotes, right?
Right, I'm
She's
not.
not saying footnote for that, right?
Right.
So it references, she says, this idea is inspired by Elizabeth Moltmann Wendell, who wrote, I Am My Body, A Theology of Embodiment. And so I'm wondering, there must be something more in that theology of embodiment that
Hmm.
maybe articulates it better. But she says, I promise not to see my body as something separate from me, as a commodity, as something that must earn approval to be loved. Just as I am the beloved, so is my body. Just as my psyche deserves compassionate attention, so does my body. My body is me. Oh, and she does even in like a couple paragraphs ahead, she said, mostly I try to listen to it now, to pour kindness all over those parts of me that have been plagued by my own criticisms and self-doubt. I'm trying to live out what I already know. My body is me. So maybe it is like a radical acceptance, maybe is what she is kind of saying. But I agree because you also think of like, there are people who maybe are disfigured from a fire, suffer from a spinal cord injury, and have a considerable part of their body that is not functional or have an amputation. And so, you are still you, right? So I
Mhm.
I agree that without the further explanation of what is this embodiment theology.
Mhm. It leaves some things unanswered.
Right.
I will give her the credit of saying, I just need a little bit more information.
Right. Yes.
And I will also say that not having the footnotes was definitely a disadvantage. And even not being able to see the format of the text on the page, like even that can make a difference.
Right.
So I've definitely learned my lesson. Don't use Audible for nonfiction.
She says Jesus's body didn't just serve him, it was him. Jesus was his body, and yes, he would later suffer, die, and be buried in his body before rising and finally becoming unconstrained by human limits again. But let's not pass over his 33 years on earth too quickly. Let's not rush past his death and sacrifice in his body. Jesus' life on earth says, I choose to sacrifice my body so you can honor and pay compassionate attention to yours. This is the length to which I'll go to love you.
Mm-hmm. I loved that.
Yeah. And then, of course, we love this section where she said, let's pray and go to therapy too. We wholeheartedly agree with that, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. Was that in the section when she was talking about her family doing the prayer circles at their house? When her parents were having a lot of conflict and strife. And so they started having like regular prayer meetings at their house to help bring people in. And they kind
Yeah.
of thought they were doing was sending off any dark spirits or kind of spiritual warfare, but really it was people knowing and entering in
Mm-hmm.
because they kind of had this expectation like, oh, God could just heal all of this and fix every conflict
Right.
and ease all of the tension and the disagreement. Like he could do that in a moment if we pray hard enough. But really, she saw it as blessing that people would enter in and know, like, who does that? Who,
Mm,
have Carrie and I ever? I mean, we have gone to people in confidence and sought wise counsel through the church when we have gone through seasons of really difficulty, like understanding each other and in marriage and in parenting and that has been intensely beneficial. But to bring people into your home and put chairs in a circle in your living room and say we cannot make it, we've got to
right.
have some intervention, we need people who know that this is the mess that it is. I
Mm,
just thought, wow, that's, were they believing like for the highest and best? Yes. Was
right.
that what God's answer was? No, it ended up not being. But even though the prayers were not answered the way that they wanted them to, it was almost like the compassionate witness element there, and people
Mm-hmm.
coming in and praying on behalf of their marriage and their relationship and their family. That was the compassionate witness was the movement of the Holy Spirit, not necessarily like just all of the conflict and strife being alleviated, like
Right.
not what they were wanting, but
Right.
sanctifying nonetheless.
So the next section is try softer with your emotions. When we approach our distressing emotions with curiosity and compassion, we can learn to soar. I do like how she talked about the shaming emotions, like how people will shame you, like, don't listen to your feelings. They'll always lead you astray. Your feelings are sinful. You shouldn't feel that
Mhm.
way. Having feelings makes you weak. And then she asked the question, how do I reconcile the idea that I am a deeply emotional and sensitive person with the common narrative that it's not okay to honor our feelings? Are difficult emotions sinful? Do we simply need to silence our feelings? And if that's not the answer, what is? And I think you talked about in the first episode on this book about David and how she just, and this is the part where she talks about David and all of his feelings. And I try every year to read through the Psalms, at least once, read all 150. And the more you read David's Psalms, you just feel that pattern, and you are just so aware of he's going to God with all these feelings, and it's anger and wants revenge and wants justice. And
Mm,
as he's pouring out his heart to God and processing through, then he gets to, after he pours it all out, then he's like, but God, you are with me. God, you are faithful. God, you are my rock. My hope is in you. My trust is in you. And so I loved, the more I read through the Psalms, I was realizing, yes, we have to pour our hearts out to God. Like, that's the point. And then, especially those of us with big emotions, and me, and especially those of us that are verbal processors, me, like, there are times I have to like verbally talk to God, like out loud, and say all the things you're feeling. And it's not wrong to feel all those things and to
mm,
process it. And as you go through that, then God leads you to this place where, oh, yes, okay, I can praise you again. And so, yeah, I love the being aware of our emotions and not just shaming everyone for having them, or we're weak, or we're immature Christians, or whatever.
mhm. What you're describing, like kind of that pattern in the Psalms, is it reminds me of the verses that say to not be anxious about anything, but in prayer and petition and with
Mm.
thanksgiving to present our requests to God. And then
Yes.
happens, then the peace of God, which we can't even understand or explain, it we receive it and it makes no sense because our circumstance hasn't changed. It transcends all understanding and it guards our hearts and our minds. So like every time I read a psalm and I see that turning point, and when I read my old journals, I can find in these long journal entries where I'm pouring my heart out, there's this turning point, and it's like, oh, now I see. It's like the Lord
Hmm.
kind of opens my eyes to the goodness or to the work or to the fruit or to the obedience or to the call that I have. I don't know, my eyes have been open to it. But yeah, that pattern there, that's a very real thing. And you don't reach that, you don't get to that turning point if you don't engage,
Yes.
right? The first part of that is turning to him. Don't be anxious, but present these things to him with thanksgiving. So I just appreciated her just bringing the Psalms into the conversation, but then
Mhm.
also just like David's such a great example of somebody who was just so raw and honest with the Lord. And
Yes.
that the Lord every time was like, just give it to me. I,
Yes.
I got you. Like
I can
you,
handle this.
David was after the Lord's heart because he was constantly offering his own. There
Mm.
was no part of his heart that was hidden from the Lord. David held nothing back,
Yeah.
and God stayed so faithful to him.
Hmm.
Not in spite of it, but because of it, because
Hmm.
David was continually saying, Lord, I seek you. Lord, I trust you. Lord, this is just the worst. This is awful.
Hmm.
How could you leave me? How could you not listen to me? Oh, wait, you're always there. You're by my side when I sleep. You're by my side when I awake.
Mm.
You know every breath before I take it. And she talked in this section about naming emotions, like
Hmm.
naming your emotions. And we have this funny thing in our family, and I don't
Yeah.
Amelia knows what I'm gonna say. And this is part of like the mechanical way that I sort of manage emotions sometimes, other than anger, I guess, because I don't say, oh, mad. But
Right.
sometimes I'll say, oh, sadness, instead of,
Oh.
or I'll say like, oh, big, no, but I will say if I drop something or if I'm disappointed or, whatever, fill in the blank, I'll say, oh, sadness. And so now that has kind of become
Oh.
this thing that everybody says.
I love that.
It's kind of like the dashboard of emotions. Like I've talked to the girls over the years too about how your emotions are important, but they cannot be your navigation. They're just like,
Yes.
look at the car. There's the gas. There's the tachometer. There's the speedometer. There's, all these different parts, but none of these are telling me where to go. They're
Hmm.
giving me information. And so I try to kind of frame, like, as we've learned about emotions and I'm learning how to teach them about emotions. And I
Yes.
sure wish that I'd had some of the resources that are available now. I wish I'd had those when they were little so that we could have
Right.
had the language to talk about feelings in a healthier way. Yeah, the sadness thing, that's kind of become, Carrie doesn't say it, but the girls and I do, and we kind of laugh about it. But there's also another time, it's been years ago, but one of our girls was having a really hard time with something, and there were tears, and I was there, and it was one of the times when I wasn't contributing to the stress. The Lord gave me the grace and the patience to like be a comforting presence. And I remember just hugging her and saying, I used the words big feelings. I
Mm-hmm.
said something like, lots of big feelings, huh? And she said, she agreed. She said, yeah. And it was almost like, and I had never used that language before, but it was almost like it was this way of saying, like, I didn't even have to name the feelings.
Mm.
I just acknowledged that they were big and heavy and hard.
Yeah.
And it, like, in the moment, that seemed like enough. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know if that was going to be one of those things where I got some like, Mom, don't say stupid things, or, like,
Right.
Mom, you don't know what you're talking about, or that's not helpful, or I'm not five. I wasn't
Right.
sure how it would land, but it was just what I was seeing. It was kind of like this reflecting back instead of me trying to like talk her down or talk her out of
Right.
her feelings, which I've done before, and it doesn't work. But just saying, like, gosh, lots of big feelings, huh? And
Mm.
the head nodded, and it was like she knew that I could tell that this was big and hard. And that was the compassionate witness.
Right.
That's what that was
Yes.
in that moment. I mean, I don't remember any other details. We were sitting on the side of her bed together,
Oh,
but I
so
remember
good.
sometimes just even saying they're just big.
Yeah.
It feels like a lot.
And I remember, the verse, do not let the sun go down on your anger. And so I remember people like before we got married and even after we got married of saying, oh, you can't go to bed angry. You have to, and there may be times when your spouse's window of tolerance is done,
Mhm.
and so I wrestled with like, what do I do? And so I was like, oh my goodness, it's don't let the sun go down on your anger, as in my anger. Like I need to reconcile myself with the Lord before I go to sleep.
Mm.
And so realizing just to pour my heart out to him, and then he's the one who gives us peace. And so I think I've said multiple times, like I'm a verbal processor. And so I want to verbally talk through all the things, but not all of your people may have the capacity and the margin to be able to do that. And so remembering you can go to God with all these feelings. And there are times when at night I will email myself, like, because I don't want to have to talk it out, But so anyway, it's easier for me to just sit at the laptop and I can just type out all my feelings and get it all out so I can verbally process silently. And then, the next morning I can just delete that email if I want to. I don't have to keep it. But I think there's such fruit can come from finding ways to healthily recognize what you're feeling,
Mhm.
process through that. Because there's so many, I have done so many unhealthy ways of doing that. And it can lead to, I mean, it could damage relationships when we just blah, 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 all of the emotions. So, one of the books she recommends and refers to in this chapter is Pete Scazzero's Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, which has to be one of my all-time favorite books too. And it is probably one of the most helpful books I have ever read on emotions and on spiritual health. There is emotionally healthy woman, there's like emotionally healthy churches. So his whole ministry is just so good and so practical and so helpful. So I highly recommend reading through that book. And it was one that I actually was thinking when we were just talking about doing a summer book club that that would be a great one to do because there's so much to discuss and go through. But the next chapter is try softer with your internal critic. Do you have a loud internal critic?
Oh goodness. I have kind of a weird relationship with the internal critic, and sometimes it's This is kind of a weird thing to acknowledge, but my in that internal narrative for me, it's not critical, like in a negative or a shameful way. It's sometimes a little too far in the other direction.
Oh, interesting.
And I think Amelia's telling me I'm lucky.
Right.
I'll work on that, babe. I think when I was young and in my grown up years, I got so much praise
Mm,
for performance in school and musical things that I would do. And so I had a lot of very positive input.
yeah.
And then I think over the years, that just sort of, especially when I was kind of socially isolated, and then I was still doing well academically, but not really getting a lot of like individualized feedback, my mind sort of picked up. And my parents were encouraging, especially my dad, but my parents were both like very positive in terms of like my achieving and my academics, grades, all of that. And so my brain was kind of spinning this narrative more of like, that's really great. You, I hope somebody notices that. You worked really hard on that. Look
Mhm.
how neatly you sanded those corners, or, whatever it was. So I feel like for myself, that internal voice isn't a critic in terms of like a shameful voice. There is an internal critic that is looking for ways to always improve things
Mm,
because I'm a one. So I'm always
mhm.
like the title of the in the Enneagram book, the first one that came out, the title of the first chapter or of the chapter on ones is things could always be better. And that's how
Right.
Allison knew that I was a one because I said that and she was like, "Oh, that's the title of the first chapter. Okay, this is easy." But that internal voice for myself is not like a critic with like a negative or a shameful
Mm,
tone. It's more like, how can things be improved? And I think that's also sort of that, maybe it's part of that kind of the dryness of how my brain works, where it's not like this, there's not heavy emotion there. It's really more just kind of mechanical and dry, if
mm,
that makes sense.
yeah.
Kind of very just direct and matter of fact.
That does make sense. And it's interesting. Mine is it could always be better, and you should have done it better.
Oh,
And it's which I think we talked about this some when we were talking with Kaylee and Anouk, that it's like the productivity thing too, like feeling like I need to be productive or I didn't do enough.
mm-hmm.
And even if it's not productivity, even in relationships, if I'm not doing enough,
Mm-hmm.
I can feel that internal critic. But in this section, she has try softer affirmations, which I feel like these really encompass a lot of the things from part one of the book and make it very practical. Like she says, I have choices, I can set boundaries. It's okay to disappoint people.
Mm-hmm.
I am capable. I am loved no matter what. I am valuable. I can ask for support. It's okay to need help. My emotions give me information. My body supports me. My body gives me information. I am responsible for only myself. It's okay to take care of myself. This emotion is temporary. I am beloved.
Mm-hmm.
So those affirmations really all hit home for me.
Those are good.
Really good.
I think too, one thing that I just thought of is like kind of my direct, kind of dry, mechanical approach with things. I think some of that maybe ties a little bit to that radical acceptance
Mm,
piece too, because you're saying it could have been things could always be better and you should have already done it that way, is what
right.
we're saying, something along those lines. And my brain says, yes, things could have been better. I could have done that better. But if I didn't, it's because I'm human and I'm doing my best and
Mm,
I'll learn from this and I'll do it better next time. Like my brain just says, there's no emotions attached to this. This is just, this just is what it is. Like
wow.
I'm a human. And that's kind of the way that I have dealt with things with the girls too. Like if something breaks or if somebody makes a mistake, or, I keep waiting for that first phone call, like, Mom, I hit somebody, I drove in the back, I rear-ended
Yes.
somebody or whatever. And I like, they know that if they make a mistake, I'm the first person that they can call because I am kind of emotionless.
Mm,
Like, I don't, I don't really flip out about, if something special breaks, I'll be disappointed. I'll probably say, oh, sadness. But I'm
right,
not
right.
sadness, but I'll say, that it was just an accident.
Mm,
But I think some of that is really just that radical acceptance of, what, this is an opportunity for us to work through a mistake or an accident or whatever together, and it's okay. And yes, I can feel sad and whatever, but I don't know. I don't know if the girls see that as a good example, or if they're kind
mhm.
of like, gosh, I wish Mom wasn't such a robot. I mean,
Right,
I'm definitely not a robot, but
right. Oh, for
I
sure.
do kind of wonder what they think.
Yes. And I think at different seasons of their life, they will probably think differently too. I kind of have to give
Yeah,
myself grace in that
yeah, that's true.
situation. And I feel like I have that for other people. It's mostly for
Mhm.
myself,
Yes, yeah, yeah.
that internal critic and those high standards. So the last section is try softer with resilience. The hard things that cracked us open have the potential to create space for deeper joy and resilience. And I feel like this chapter is kind of a summary that
Mhm.
of all of this kind of practical things.
She talks a lot about surrender in this, which I felt like was fitting, and also a sort of a comforting way to end the
Yes.
book, because ultimately it is just taking all of these things, the way that we're made, our complexities, our imperfections, the things that we wish were different, the things that we want to grow, all of that, kind of the mystery of how we're wired with our emotions and our body and all of these things. And ultimately, we lay it in the hands of God. And
Yes.
that is a place where we can say, you know what, it's okay that I don't understand. It is okay that I don't have all the answers, or I can't figure this out, or that I haven't made the progress in therapy that I wish I had made, or, fill in the blank. I don't know. I felt like surrender was a comforting place to land.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think it ties in with compassionate witness for ourselves and others,
Mm-hmm.
the radical acceptance, remembering that you are the beloved and all learning to try softer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like the idea of like ourselves, ourselves as individuals, as people, I feel like one of the things we've talked about a lot over our two full seasons now. We're almost done with second season. One of the themes that we seem to continually revisit is this idea of being like the wholeness of a person, like this holistic view of ourselves as people. And that's one of the things that she talked about in this, like when she wraps up the book too, is us being whole and integrated. I don't know. I just felt like that kind of echoed a lot to so many of our other conversations.
Yes.
I felt like that
And
was a
it
good
ties
connection.
in with the greatest commandment to love the Lord your God with all your heart and your
Mm-hmm.
mind and your body, your soul, so all of those, that
Mm-hmm.
whole embodiment of this sacred human that we are. Yeah, that's good.
Mm. This has been a great discussion. Now I'm going to order the hard copy, and I'm going to read the read the hard
Yes.
copy
We
instead of
might
just
have
the
to do
audio.
a PS episode where we can have Jennifer's hard copy thoughts.
Goodness, all the things that I'll highlight and underline. I'm sure
Right.
there will be a lot. Oh, happiness.
Oh, I love it. We're gonna have to start doing that.
Yeah.
One of the things we would say is use your words.
Yeah.
So if they were feeling all these things, use your words. What's going on? So now we can name it with
Mhm.
happiness.
Good.
I
Very
love
good.
it. Oh, this has been such a good discussion, and we would just love to hear from you all if you have joined us for the summer book club, kind of what your thoughts are, you can always email us. You can go to medicinemotherhood.com and sign up for our email list. And through that, you can email with us. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Find a Moment Podcast. Send us a message through there, and Jennifer and I will get back to you and continue that conversation. So be in touch, and we are excited for our next episode. It will be our season 2 recap
Wow.
and our first birthday celebration and our 50th episode celebration.
Wow. That's a lot of big things. Happiness.
Yay! So much
Celebration.
to celebrate. And we might have to do a local coffee crawl again. So if you are local, follow us on Find a Moment Podcast, and we will tell you where we will be, and we can find a moment together out in the wild.
Love that. Thanks for finding a moment with us.